I have watched 3 kings go to war. 1 calculated everything. 2 calculated nothing. I buried the 2. The one who calculated everything. He died in his bed, at 93, surrounded by grandchildren. You want to understand the art of war? Then sit still and do not speak. What I'm about to tell you took me 60 years to truly understand, and I'm not sure I have much time left to say it. There is a word Sun Tzu uses at the very beginning, vital. The art of war, he says, is of vital importance to the state, not useful, not interesting, vital, as in, without it, you die, the state dies. Everything your ancestors built crumbles into dust and silence. I was 17 years old when I first read those words. I thought I understood them. I did not. You cannot understand the weight of that word until you have stood on a field after a battle that should never have been fought, and counted the bodies of men who followed orders given by a king who had never once asked the right questions. This is the story of 2 men. I will call them Commander Wei and King Zhao. They lived in the same era, the time of the warring states, when China was not one country but many, and every prince with an army believed himself destined for the throne of heaven. King Zhao ruled a prosperous northern kingdom, rich in grain, strong in horses, proud beyond all reason. He had never lost a battle, but only because his generals, before me, had always quietly steered him away from the ones he would lose. Commander Wei was a different kind of man entirely. Small, quiet, the kind of man you would not notice in a marketplace. He wore no decorations on his armor. He kept no hunting dogs. He ate the same food as his soldiers, plain rice, dried fish, salted vegetables. Every morning, before dawn, before his men even stirred, he sat alone in his command tent with his maps, his brushes, and a clay tablet on which he carved 5 characters: heaven, earth, commander, moral law, method. He meditated on these 5 things every single morning for 30 years. Sun Tzu calls these the 5 constant factors, and he is not poetic about it. He is brutal, he says. He who knows them will be victorious. He who knows them not will fail. There is no middle ground, no exceptions written in the margin. These 5 factors, the moral law, heaven, earth, the commander, and method and discipline, are the entire architecture of whether you live or die before the first arrow is ever fired. Let me tell you what the moral law actually means, because most men get it wrong. It is not about being righteous. It is not about the gods favoring you. The moral law means this: do your soldiers believe in what they are fighting for? Do they believe in you? Would they follow you into fire, not because you ordered them to, but because they trust you with their very lives? Commander Wei understood this. He spent 3 years before any campaign simply living among his troops, eating with them, listening to them, learning the name of every man's father. King Zhao, on the other hand, gave speeches, grand speeches from horseback, in his finest armor, with banners flying and drums thundering. His men cheered, because they feared him if they did not. But there is a difference between a soldier who cheers and a soldier who dies for you willingly. King Zhao never learned that difference. He mistook noise for loyalty. He mistook fear for devotion. And one day, that mistake cost him everything. Now, heaven. Sun Tzu means the conditions of time, night and day, cold and heat, the seasons. A general who ignores heaven is a fool. Commander Wei kept records, 20 years of weather records for every region where he might one day fight. He knew that the river plains to the south flooded every 3rd spring. He knew that the mountain passes to the west became impassable in the second month of winter. He planned around what heaven would do, not around what he wished heaven would do, and earth, distances, terrain, open ground and narrow passes, danger and safety. Commander Wei walked every battlefield before his army arrived, on foot, with no escort, sometimes disguised as a merchant or a wandering monk. He touched the soil with his hands. He tested the depths of rivers with a stick. He climbed hills to see what a defender would see. He did not trust reports. He trusted his own feet and his own eyes. The commander himself. Sun Tzu is very specific here. 5 virtues: wisdom, sincerity, benevolence, courage, and strictness. All 5? Not 4, not 3, all 5 in balance. Too much courage and you become reckless. Too much benevolence and your men grow soft and undisciplined. Too much strictness and they resent you and whisper against you in the dark. Commander Wei carried all 5. I watched him. I served under him for 11 years. He was the only man I ever met who made the enemy afraid before the battle even began, simply because of who he was known to be, method and discipline. The marshalling of the army in its proper order, the chain of command, the roads kept clear for supplies, the accounting of every arrow, every grain of rice, every horse. Commander Wei had a saying, "A general who cannot count is not a general. He is a gambler, and the lives of 10,000 men are not chips to be wagered at a table." Before any campaign, his scribes spent months calculating. How many men? How many days of march? How many li of road? How much grain? Every number, verified. Every contingency, named. Now I come to the 7 considerations. Sun Tzu says, before any battle, compare these 7 things between yourself and your enemy. Which ruler holds the more law? Which general has greater ability? Which side holds the advantage of heaven and earth? Which side enforces discipline more rigorously? Which army is stronger? Whose officers and men are better trained? Which side is more consistent in reward and punishment? If you can honestly answer all 7, not as you wish the answers to be, but as they truly are, then you can foresee victory or defeat before anyone has marched a single step. King Zhao sent a messenger to Commander Wei one spring morning. The messenger arrived with a jade tablet bearing the royal seal. On it, 3 words: march by autumn. No consultation, no discussion, no asking of the 7 questions. Just march by autumn. The king had heard that a neighboring state to the east had suffered a poor harvest. He believed this was his moment. He wanted a quick victory to add to his legend. He had not slept on it. He had not prayed over it. He had barely discussed it with a single advisor. He had simply decided. Commander Wei held that jade tablet for a long time. Then he set it down. He called his senior officers, and for 3 days he asked the 7 questions, not about the king's command but about the enemy. He sent scouts, fast men, on the best horses, riding to the eastern border. He sent merchants who were actually his own agents into the enemy's markets to observe grain prices, the mood of the people, the state of the roads. He waited. He calculated. He made many calculations in his temple. As Sun Tzu says, many. The scouts returned, and the picture that assembled itself was not what King Zhao had seen from the comfort of his throne room. Yes, the Eastern Kingdom had suffered a poor harvest, but their king, frightened by that very poverty, had drilled his army harder than ever. Lean and hungry men fight differently than fat and comfortable ones. Their eastern general, a man named Lord Gao, had quietly repositioned his forces to the 3 narrow passes that controlled the only practical invasion routes. He was not unprepared. He was waiting. Commander Wei wrote back to King Zhao a long letter, respectful as was proper, but honest as was necessary. He explained all of it, the 7 comparisons one by one. On the question of heaven, the autumn rains would make the eastern plains a swamp within 6 weeks of the campaign's start. On the question of earth, the enemy held all 3 passes. On the question of the moral law, Lord Gao's men were fighting for their homes, their hungry families, their survival. That kind of motivation cannot be purchased with gold. Commander Wei concluded, "We should not march this autumn. We should wait 1 year and prepare differently." King Zhou read the letter. Then he burned it, and he sent a second jade tablet. This one did not say march by autumn. It said march now. I remember the day the second tablet arrived. Commander Wei sat still for a very long time. Then he said something I have never forgotten. He said, "A king who will not listen to his general has already lost the battle. He is simply waiting for the battlefield to confirm it." Then he stood up, put on his armor, and gave the order to march. Because a soldier obeys, even when it breaks his heart. What followed was not a swift victory. It was exactly what Commander Wei had calculated it would be. The autumn rains came early that year, 3 weeks early. The plains turned to bog. The supply wagons sank to their axles. The horses sickened. The men, wet and cold and far from home, began to lose that invisible thing that Sun Tzu calls spirit. And at the first narrow pass, Lord Gao's men were waiting, rested, fed, defending from high ground, on terrain they had walked every day for months. The battle lasted 2 days. King Zhao's army retreated. Nearly 4,000 men did not come home. But now I must tell you the other side of this story, because this is where Sun Tzu teaches the deepest lesson of chapter 1. And it is this: all warfare is based on deception. Commander Wei, despite the retreat, despite the losses, had not stopped thinking. He had spent those 2 days of battle observing something. Lord Gao, that disciplined and brilliant defender, had one weakness. He was proud. When King Zhao's army retreated, Lord Gao's men cheered so loudly it carried on the wind for miles. Lord Gao himself rode to the edge of his pass and watched the retreat with visible satisfaction. He was celebrating. And a general who celebrates too early has already begun to make mistakes. Commander Wei feigned complete disorder in the retreat. He let the rumor spread. Through captured soldiers he released deliberately, through merchants he paid, that King Zhao's army was broken, demoralized, that its commander had fallen ill, that it had retreated all the way back past the border river. None of this was true. The army had pulled back only 20 li. In a hidden valley, behind a ridge of pine forest, Commander Wei spent the next 3 weeks doing the opposite of retreating. He drilled his men. He dried their clothes. He fed them well from supply stores he had secretly pre-positioned 3 months earlier. Because even when marching to a battle he advised against, he had prepared for what came after. Lord Gao, believing the enemy broken, relaxed his watch on the passes. He sent 1/3 of his men home to help with the harvest. After all, the threat was gone, and hungry families needed hands in the fields. He reduced the night patrols. He stopped drilling his remaining men with the same intensity. He had won, hadn't he? Why keep sharpening a sword that had already cut? On the 42nd night after the retreat, Commander Wei moved, not through the passes Lord Gao was guarding, through a route no one had considered, a dry riverbed mapped months ago during Commander Wei's own scouting expeditions on foot, disguised as a monk. By dawn, his army stood on the eastern plain, behind Lord Gao's position entirely. The trap was complete before Lord Gao even knew the hunt had resumed. The battle that followed lasted less than one morning. Lord Gao, faced with an army behind him and chaos in his ranks, could not coordinate his defense. His passes, so brilliantly held 6 weeks before, were now worthless fortifications facing the wrong direction. He surrendered before midday. Not a single city was burned. The Eastern Kingdom was taken intact, exactly as Sun Tzu prescribes. Commander Wei had made many calculations. He had seen the victory before it existed. He had bent like water around the stones that blocked him and carved a new path. And he had used deception, not as a trick, but as a fundamental principle, at every single step. King Zhou held a great banquet when Commander Wei returned. He took all the credit. He toasted himself. He gave a speech about his own destiny and the favor of heaven. Commander Wei sat quietly at the far end of the table and ate his rice. I sat next to him. I was young then. I asked him, "Does it not bother you that he takes the credit?" And Commander Wei looked at me with those quiet eyes and said, "I did not fight for credit. I fought to bring those men home. Most of them came home. That is the only calculation that matters at the end. Sun Tzu says it plainly. The general who wins a battle makes many calculations in his temple before the battle is fought. The general who loses makes but few, and the general who makes none at all, he is not a general. He is simply a man with a sword, walking towards something he does not understand. Do not be that man. Sit in your temple. Ask the 5 questions. Ask the 7. Count everything. And when you move, move like water. Find the low place. Find the unguarded path. Appear where you are not expected. That is the whole of chapter 1. That is the whole of it. I am very old now. My calculations are mostly done. But I can still count. And I tell you, the man who masters this chapter alone truly masters it, in his bones and not just in his head. That man will not need to fight very often, and the battles he does fight, he will already have won. Long before a single drum is ever struck,